All right, we're live. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am joined with the one and only Scott Ritter. He was nice enough to join me this morning. Scott Ritter is a former UN weapons inspector and weapons of mass destruction whistleblower and good friend of this show. Scott, thank you, my man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yourself?
I am doing good. Better that you were with me. I want to start with Sudzha. So Donald Trump has 30-day ceasefire. I'm putting in quotes. It's very limited in scope. It is supposed to deal with issues of oil infrastructure and those type of things. Within 5 hours, Ukraine had violated the ceasefire agreement, the limited one that they agreed upon. And yesterday, they had Sudzha leading to these massive fires right here. This is what we're looking at with this. And I mean, just massive explosions because, again, they're hitting pipelines. That the ceasefire said, okay, we agreed to the ceasefire, and then fully blew off that same ceasefire. Like, what is it indicative of in regards to any kind of agreements that Trump was able to reach and is able to reach with a Ukraine that is effectively trying to humiliate Trump and get across? We are not on board for this, even if we say we are. I'm fascinated by that dynamic. Give me your take on this.
But Ukraine's never been serious about peace. I've never seen a nation more suicidal than Ukraine. Starting a conflict back in 2022, then playing the victim, turning down the best chance they had for peace with the Istanbul communique, then continuing a fight that literally transformed them from a sovereign nation into a proxy for a larger conflict between the West and Russia, where the West was trying to strategically defeat Russia using Ukraine as a tool. And now that this tool has been used up, rather than, trying to get out of this conflict and save what they can, just doubling down on stupid in this suicidal madness. Ukraine is infected with a disease. It's called, banderist Ukrainian nationalism. I've been, doing a lot of research into the roots of this. And a key aspect of this is a rejection of everything Russia. And so this has become a phobia for them. They can't stand that they've been beaten by Russia. They can't stand that Russia will take territory that Russia claims has always belonged to them from Ukraine. This feeds into all of their phobias, and they're unable to think rationally. Immediately after they attacked the Sudzha, the gas transfer plant, they said Russia did it. I mean, this is literally, it won't stand up under any forensic examination. It just shows a total disregard for any agreement they've come into, but it also disrespect for the United States. And then they've also attacked, I think, in Krasnodar, another oil plant, big fire there. Ukraine has no intention of abiding by any ceasefire. And my only hope is that the Trump administration recognizes this and gives Russia the green light to deliver a warning blow to Ukraine of the likes Ukraine will never forget. A warning blow that says, if you want a war, you will get a war, but a war means none of you live. And I'm not talking about nuclear war. I'm just talking about a war of national destruction, which Russia has avoided. But if Trump wants peace, he needs to get rid of Zelenskyy. Zelenskyy is the problem. And he needs to eliminate Zelenskyy and replace Zelenskyy with somebody who will accept peace on terms acceptable to Russia. Ukraine doesn't have any leverage in this fight anymore, other than the leverage that a suicidal person has in trying to bring down as many people with them. Desperate people are capable of doing desperate things. But Ukraine is not a rational actor right now, not a responsible player. And that's because of the leadership of Zelenskyy. And, his phobias are being fed by Europe right now. He's in Europe right now being spoon-fed all the things he needs to hear to continue this nonsense. And Trump needs to crack down on Europe as well. I mean, Europe right now is structuring this plan for a 5 to 10 year graceful exit of the United States from NATO. And we need to tell Europe, we'll pull out right now. We'll collapse the whole thing. We'll bring it all down. If you want to play this stupid game, then you will win stupid prizes, because that's what's happening here. Europe and Ukraine are playing the dumbest of games. It's a very dangerous game. Trump has given everybody a chance for peace, and the Russians are willing to accept this. Ukraine and Europe apparently are not.
No, they're not. And as you pointed out, Zelenskyy is over there right now repudiating everything that Trump seems to be agreeing with. I mean, Witkoff goes over to Europe. Donald Trump has a conversation with Putin. Putin gives no ground. The ceasefire agreement that they agreed to, well, there was no rationale that Russia was going to hit the energy grid anyway within 30 days. So, yeah, okay, Donald Trump got something to hang his hat on and some leeway where he can say, I got something out of this deal. But Zelenskyy is talking to the leader of Finland, and it's like, yeah, we're not going to give up territory. We're not going to give up any of this stuff. Behind the scenes, it is saying that Ukraine is accepting the fact that territorial concessions are going to be a part of it. Openly, Zelenskyy is like, we're not doing that. How would you go about getting rid of him?
How would I go about getting rid of him?
I mean, I know that's a weird question to say, and I don't mean somebody whacking him. I just mean, you're right. He's an impediment.
No, but Jamal, we're in. Let's just be honest. We're in big boy rules games right now. Okay, Zelenskyy has betrayed the United States, betrayed the cause of peace, and is threatening the world with annihilation. Because this thing, if it spins bad, could go nuclear. Remember, it wasn't just a little while ago that we're talking about. So this isn't, funny kid games. This is the CIA arranges somebody to come in and plug his head with a bullet kind of game. This Zelenskyy has to go. If he doesn't want to go willingly, then he goes violently. And the United States has done this in the past. It's not a proud history, but it's a tool that is available to be used. And, I'm not openly advocating for that. I would prefer, nonviolent, peaceful resolution to these issues. But I want to remind people listening here that the game Zelensky's playing is costing thousands of people their lives every day. Most of them Ukrainians. All right. And it could cost millions of lives globally. It's not a winning hand. He's not coming out of this with anything he wants. He's simply playing a stupid game to feed his narcissistic ego that's cocaine fueled, because it is cocaine fueled. The man is a drug addict. We also need to acknowledge that reality. The time for intervention has long passed. This man doesn't think clearly. He's under the influence of substances that feed into his narcissistic nature. And the end is this self-destructive behavior. So I think it's time for the gloves to come off. I mean, he needs to be told, you're done. You're finished. You're out of here. And there's only one nation that can tell him that, and that's the United States. And we can make it happen instantly. The man has a life expectancy of 0 if we choose to execute this option. And there's any number of ways that this can be executed. You can do it indirectly, directly. All you have to do is drop a hint that you want it done, and it will be done by people who are looking to curry favor by the United States in a post-conflict environment. So he is the problem. Zelenskyy is the problem, and he must be eliminated, because the longer this goes on, he's threatening to sabotage everything. And when I mean everything, it's not just peace in Ukraine. I'm talking about the potential of the United States and Russia normalizing relations, heading us down a track where cooperation, not conflict, is the name of the game. And that feeds into an overall environment of stability. Look, not to get too far off, if there's one chance for getting out of this Iranian crisis that we currently face, it's Russia willing to step up and negotiate an end to this conflict. That would be doing America and the world a huge favor. But why would Russia do that if the United States is in the business of facilitating Ukraine's continued refusal to recognize reality and bring harm and destruction to strategic interests? Ukraine attacked Ingalls Air Base. That is a base that is home to Russia's nuclear-capable aircraft. That is a trigger for nuclear war. straight up, doctrinally, if you attack our command and control or strategic nuclear infrastructure, we can take you off the map. Now, Russia's not going to do that, but this is why it's serious, people. This isn't a game. Ukraine has lost this war. Russia has never gone to war. But if Ukraine's going to act like it can do these strategic strikes against Russia and pay no price because they think that the Russians are afraid to lash out because that would undo the peace, then Ukraine's in charge. And that's like putting a madman in charge of the insane asylum.
There's also the secondary thing that Russia distrusts the U.S. for good reason. And seeing Donald Trump ignore the ceasefire deal that he agreed with Hamas, and now seeing Ukraine ignoring a peace deal. Okay, well, what does that mean for a peace process? Like, if the U.S. took the position, despite the fact that Israel was continuously violating the agreement with Hamas, and we paid no mind to the fact that Israel was violating the deal with Hamas, and then you get a deal with Ukraine that is limited in scope, extraordinarily limited in scope, and then they violate it immediately, and there's no response by the U.S. for the violation of Ukraine of that deal. Okay, then what does it mean for a larger deal with the U.S. when you need to be able to trust them in any deal and negotiation that you end up with?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know a little bit more about the goings on, because while I don't want to give the United States a pass on what's going on in Gaza, I think we have to understand that Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure domestically, with Shin Bet coming after him, the courts coming after him. And rather than saying the United States greenlit anything, I think we need to also play, a possibility that Netanyahu is an insane, desperate man capable of doing insane, desperate things. Yes, I would like the United States to speak out more fervently, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Because I still have hope that Trump is serious about bringing peace to the Middle East and not simply creating wall-to-wall conflict, which appears to be the direction we're headed in.
He just went to war in Yemen. He's doing bombing raids.
Well, but again, I'm Jamal. I support Ansarallah and all that. But the United States made it clear that the disruption of international shipping and international shipping lanes is an act of war and not going to be tolerated. We made that clear under the Biden administration, and Trump is making it clear. It's consistency in policy. Yemen made a decision. Their decision is morally founded, but don't be surprised when the world says no and respond.
I accept that.
But the best way to finish this isn't to bomb Yemen into submission, because that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
It's to get Israel to stop doing stupidity in Gaza. That should be our focus of effort. Why we think we can bomb a nation that's been bombed for a decade and hasn't blinked into submission is beyond me. But this is a complicated situation. It's not black and white. There are. My father taught me as a kid. I got in a fight in school and I got suspended, but the fight was for a just cause. And my dad had a chance to stop the suspension, but he asked the principal, "What's the punishment for fighting?" The principal said, "Suspension." He said, "Then why are you calling me?" And when I got home, I was furious. My dad said, "No, I'm very proud of you for standing up for your sister and doing all that kind of stuff. But there are consequences for your actions. And you can't sit here and say I'm a righteous person, if there are no consequences." I mean, what makes what the what Ansarallah is doing all the more honorable is they understood the consequences of their actions, and yet they did it anyways. But there are consequences. Right now, we have Netanyahu and Zelenskyy living in a consequence-free world for the sins they are committing. Israel is much more complicated because of the domestic political reality here in the United States, where Zionists apparently have seized control of everything. I'm surprised you and I are allowed to talk.
It may not be long, so much longer. It may not be so long.
But Zelenskyy, doesn't have. I mean, although there is a very strong Ukrainian diaspora presence, stronger than almost any Americans realize in the foreign policy structure of the United States. the Ukrainian nationalists, the Ukrainian diaspora doesn't have America by the scruff of the neck, so to speak. We could hold him accountable. I'm going to give the Trump administration the benefit of the doubt. And what I mean by that is we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't know what phone calls are being made and things of that nature. But if this persists without any effort by the Trump administration to stop Ukraine or punish Ukraine, then you're 100% right. Russia has to ask the question, why? Look, they're getting ready to meet in Riyadh, delegation. And you say that Putin didn't give anything. Putin's willing to discuss opening up the Black Sea to Ukrainian commerce. But what the Russians are saying, that's why they brought this FSB guy, is they're going to brief the United States on how Ukraine and the West have conspired to use previous agreements on grain shipments to ship in weaponry under disguise, to bring in explosives that were used to blow up the Kerch Bridge, and all this. And they're going to say, this is what they've done. So if we're going to agree to this, what monitoring mechanism are you, America, willing to bring in place to ensure this doesn't ever happen again? That if ships are allowed to roam freely, that when they dock in Odessa, it will be full of grain, not weapons. And it's going to be up to the United States to say, okay, we're going to impose this. And then the Russians have to have faith in that. So Putin has put something on the table. This is a major concession. But the Russians are saying, and this is a test for the United States, because if the United States can pull off this Black Sea agreement, then Russia will say, okay, now let's look at the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's common sense, but it's not that Russia hasn't put anything. Russia just isn't about to yield the advantages that they've accrued over time on the battlefield, and politically and diplomatically. They're not going to yield them on a wing and a prayer. They need proof that there will be an effort to enforce, whatever control mechanisms are in place, so that Russia doesn't once again find themselves being naive and agreeing to something only to find that Ukraine has abused this. And again, can Ukraine be trusted? No, not at all. Not at all. And this government especially, it has to go.
Europe, as you say, is gassing up Zelensky's head. And I saw the plan. I didn't get the opportunity to go into the article because I saw it this morning. But effectively, I read bits of it. The parts that I read basically boiled down to, within 10 to 15 years, Europe is trying to find a way to have a NATO without the United States. Now, NBC News reported that Donald Trump was interested in handing over control to NATO. I'm fascinated by that dynamic. I know I said that word a lot, but I'm fascinated by it because the entire point of NATO was a power projection device of the United States. And so for the US to pull out, we effectively are trying to give up control of some of the things that are taking place in Europe. Okay, well, Europe is trying to start a third world war. It's like we keep saving their ass out of these wars and they keep starting them. And once again, they're trying to start another. I mean, give me your take on this. Is there a NATO without the United States, considering the entire point was for it to be a power projection device of the United States?
Well, actually, the birth of NATO was conceived in Europe by Europeans. And one of the reasons that NATO was created, to quote the British Lord who
keep the Americans in, keep
first
the French
Secretary General, was to keep America in. Because America doesn't want to be in Europe. Now, over time, we have used this to our advantage, our geopolitical advantage, etc. But it's a nightmare. Europe is a nightmare. It's a dysfunctional continent. Left to its own devices, it will fall upon itself as it has always done. There is no European unity. And America's tired of playing referee. We're tired of paying for it all. Europe has hidden under, or flourished, I should say, under two umbrellas: the umbrella of American security guarantees and the umbrella of cheap Russian energy. And because of that, Europe was able to create this fiction of a prosperous continent. But it's an artificial prosperity. If you're getting artificially suppressed energy prices and you don't have to pay through the nose to have this security, you get to walk around and act as if you're tougher than you are. The United States is just tired of this, fed up with it. Trump is. I should say, I can't say the United States, because the deep state loved it, because the deep state loved the rules-based international order, and NATO and the European Union represented part of this international order that the United States was using to project itself as the global hegemon. Trump has said we're no longer in the global hegemon business. We're not going to be the world's policeman. And when it comes to Europe, we're not going to front the bill for Europe anymore. There are things that we can do to ensure that we keep, that we don't totally betray Europe. For instance, Trump is talking about going in buying control of Nord Stream.
Yes,
and then when the gas flows, we have 50% control. And so, that way we at least can say Russia can't unilaterally do anything to control European. We're here, but the Europeans should be asking, but what is America? Because we blew it up before. We can,
right.
But that just again shows European dysfunction. It's a pathetic continent full of pathetic people, led by pathetic leaders. NATO, first of all, NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. There will be no NATO if America pulls out. I don't even think Canada will stay with it, because Canada can't afford to stay with it. Canada may become the 51st state. We never know. We can laugh about it, but I'm just telling you right now, Trump is apparently dead serious about this. There's a Canadian snap election coming up in October. And if you don't think we're going to spend between now and October destroying the Canadian economy, so that all the Canadian politicians now are talking about is how they can't economically survive with America. And now you're going to start to see, it wasn't just too long ago in the 1980s that there were movements in Western Canada to break away from Canada and become part of the United States. I guarantee you that Donald Trump is dreaming of reviving this kind of discussion to get those debates going. And as James Carville said, it's the economy stupid. You destroy the Canadian economy, turn it into a political disaster, and you will have people starting to say, maybe we're better off with the United States. I'm not promoting this. I believe Canada's a sovereign state, but anybody who believes that Donald Trump isn't serious about making this happen apparently doesn't know Donald Trump. When the Secretary of State of the United States of America says, yes, this is a serious thing, that means it's gone from Donald Trump's personal little joke with Trudeau to official American policy. And now the American policy machine is involved. Canada is going to be in for a lot of hurt right now. This is the greatest threat to Canadian national security that has ever existed. Donald Trump's policy of bringing them in. It's not a joking matter. It's a very serious thing. And as an American, I'm somewhat insulted by it, because I wouldn't want anybody, coming in and doing this to us. And I don't know why America thinks we have a right to go do that to Canada. It's a sovereign state. We used to be very good friends with them. And I just don't agree. It's the same thing with Greenland. Why are we doing this to our Danish allies, to the Greenland people? Who are we to walk around and redraw the world's maps? But Donald Trump's going to make it happen. I would almost bet money on it that before his term is up, Greenland will be American, one way or another, to include the potential of military forces coming in and taking it over. He hasn't ruled that out. NATO ally and all that kind of stuff. Now we get back to NATO. Europe is incapable of having a European security organization. I told you it's dysfunctional. Let's just take a look at what's happening, just so you understand this. As the big wigs, all the big European countries, are meeting to talk about a 5 to 10 year transition, did you see what's happening in Kosovo, Macedonia, Albania? They're forming their own internal security thing to fight a war against the Serbs. I told you, Europe just falls in on itself. It's incapable. And so how do you have NATO when NATO members are forming their own little clique internally to fight their own little war inside, separate from Europe? Is going to self-destruct. It's going to explode because like I said, it's a dysfunctional continent. And this is the reality. And I just think the United States is right to get out of it. And the other thing is, by making peace with Russia, that means we don't have to come back. No more Americans should ever die on European soil. We did it twice last century. We should never do it again. If Europe wants to commit suicide, if they want to devolve into the hate-filled ethnicities that they are and fall in on one another and butcher their neighbors like they are wont to do. Just remember, in Sarajevo, they lived peacefully. Bosnians and Serbs and Croats in this multinational city. Hell, they had a Winter Olympics. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Next thing you know, they're slitting throats, ripping babies out of wombs, doing horrible things just because they weren't like us. These are people who live next door to each other. They turn on. That's Europe in a nutshell. If you don't think the French would slaughter the Germans or the Germans, and everybody wants to kill the Poles and nobody cares about the Balts and the Italians, I'm just saying, Europe is dysfunctional. A 100% dysfunctional continent. And we, America, should have nothing to do with it. We need to get the hell out of there. If we can have good bilateral relations with certain nations that lead to certain economic outcomes that are favorable to the United States, so be it. But the notion that we have an obligation, a sacred trust, to quote Joe Biden, to somehow sacrifice our existential survival as a nation on behalf of a continent that's been using us for 80 years, nah. So that's the problem that Europe has. They don't want us there anymore. We don't want to be there. But if we pull out too quick, they collapse like a house of cards. They desperately, I mean, this is one of those things. It's like, like me asking for a divorce. Honey, I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. We're done. But first, baby, could you stay with me for 5 years? Let me live under your roof. Help me build up a savings account. Maybe get a car. Get a condo in Rio and all that, so I hate you and I'm leaving, but could you please help make my life luxurious and wonderful before I leave you? That's what Europe's, the stupidity of it.
But they don't seem to want us to leave. Like, they seem to be bitter about the fact that Trump is pulling out or wants to pull out.
Well, wouldn't you if you had a free ride for 8 decades?
Yeah, I guess. Right. I guess we can think of it in those ways. Yeah, it's like, how dare you, sir, pull?
How dare you stop paying my bills? How dare you stop paying my bills?
Yeah, yeah.
Europe, like I said, and they've proven it over and over again. There's nothing honorable about Europe. Nothing honorable at all. The British stab us in the back every chance they get. The French, they just live to stab us in the back. The Europeans are incapable of looking us in the eyes and telling us the truth. I would just prefer to be straight up. Pardon?
What do you mean by that? You said they can't look us in the eye and tell us the truth. Tell us the truth about what?
Starmer came here and had a meeting with Trump. Everything's wonderful. They went back and he said, "Screw you. We're doing this, that, and the other thing."
Yep.
I mean, and I always love it. The tough guy that I don't know. You probably hang out with a better crowd than I do, but back when I was in college, there would be guys who walk into a bar because you have the football team coming in, and then you got the little Chihuahua people coming in and going up and move away. What do you want? You want to fight? And they're just waiting for the football team to come in and stare the other guy down. And I don't want to fight. That's Europe, and they're used to America being back there, looming in the background, picking fights. The hell with it. We're done.
Yeah.
If Britain wants to take their pathetically small army and go off and commit suicide in Odessa, please let them do it. But we should not stand in the way as the Russians kill them all. And if the French want to do the same thing, please go die in Odessa. The Russians will kill you all. But both the French and the British are talking big. But then the last thing they always say is, of course, we need American to backstop this. You mean you need America to fight your fights? Backstop means you can't do it. Backstop means we have to step in and back you up. Backstop means we once again pay the price for your stupidity. Tired of it. Trump's tired of it. We need to get out of it. And we
By the way, is it even possible for us to pull out of NATO legally?
Well, I mean, I imagine Congress would have to get involved. It's a treaty thing. But Trump, commander in chief.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So if I were Trump, I would just say, we're closing down all the bases in Germany. They're done. 30,000 troops gone. And we're shutting down.
You just pull the troops out.
No, we're not. We're just not manning any of the billets in NATO anymore. We're leaving them vacant. We're not paying you anything anymore. We're not going to give you any more money. Oh, are we still in the treaty? Oh, yes, we're still in the treaty. Yes. Yeah. But we're not playing your stupid game anymore. And then at that point in time, Congress will, recognize reality and pass whatever legislation that needs to be passed for us to withdraw from this treaty. We'll submit the paperwork and it'll be done. But that's paperwork. The reality is, if America's heart isn't in this project, then the project won't succeed. And right now, our heart isn't in this project. What is the project? What is NATO trying to do right now? I mean, that's the interesting thing. NATO's trying to start a war with Russia. And the United States doesn't want a war with Russia. So when you have diametrically opposed political projects, the partnership falls apart. There is a strategic divergence of where Europe wants to go and where America wants to go right here. So it's over. The NATO experiment is over. It's finished.
One last topic, Iran. It seems that Donald Trump has Iran in its crosshairs. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, as you pointed out, desperate men do desperate things. He has been screaming for the last 20, 30 years that Iran is trying to build a nuclear bomb and that they are 5 minutes away from doing so. And 20 years later, it hasn't necessarily taken place, unless not in the open. How serious do you think Trump is about this idea of, well, anything that the Houthis do is effectively Iran doing it. And so we are going to hold Iran responsible for anything that the Houthis do. And so we have a license to now go after Iran. Okay, that's outrageous. Nobody voted for that. And man of peace, Donald Trump. Okay, benefit of the doubt. Threats. Trump is that way. And so those could just be threats. Do you think there's any validity to those threats?
Well, first thing, Trump didn't invent this concept. The reality is that that Ansarallah is part of the axis of resistance, and there is strategic coordination taking place between Ansarallah and Iran. To what degree and all that, I can't speak with any specificity. Is Ansarallah capable of taking sovereign actions? Of course they are. So you can't automatically link what Ansarallah is doing in Iran, but Trump's not off base in saying that Iran could do more to ratchet this thing down, and it's not in Iran's interest. I mean, Iran, they're in a confrontational mode between the United States and Iran right now. Right. Netanyahu may have been saying that Iran is 5 minutes away from a nuclear weapon, and it has been right up until recently. Now Iran is saying they're literally days away from having a nuclear weapon. This is what I want to remind people. One, Iran's not allowed to have a nuclear weapon by treaty, which they signed, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So Iran's not allowed to have one. I know people, well, I don't give a damn what you think. Legally, Iran's not allowed to have a nuclear weapon. End of story. There is no debate. If Iran wants a nuclear weapon, then do what North Korea did. Withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and then build your nuclear weapon. But Iran can't have its cake and eat it too. And yet, what Iran has done, because of they live in a difficult world and there's been threats and posturing, etc., they've had a succession of senior officials hint that, one, Iran has the technical capacity to build a nuclear weapon today if they chose to do so. And two, all they need to do is change the political decision. Right now, the supreme leader has said, no, it's haram, it's forbidden, there's a fatwa, etc. And the Iranians have all said, yes, that's valid. But when you have Jalili, a man who could have been president of Iran, lost the election in June, is now a senior advisor to the supreme leader. He sits on the Expediency Discernment Council. When Jalili says that if situations arise that pose an existential threat to Iran, then Iran is allowed to reconsider fatwas and change them to, in a manner which facilitates the survival of the Islamic Republic. In short, and if he's saying that means it has been discussed in the inner circles of the supreme leader. So the fatwa isn't carved in stone. The fatwa is written on paper, and that paper can be burned if Iran determines that it's in its interest of national survival. And Israel having nuclear weapons and threatening Iran appears to be one of those things. So now I'm Donald Trump. I roll in, and I got Netanyahu screaming about Iranian nuclear weapons. I turn to my CIA, and they go, yeah, boss, it's not good. They're they're very close. If they make a political decision, they can have this weapon very soon. And Trump's like, well, we can't let that happen. What do we do? And a return to the JCPOA isn't going to work. Let me just remind everybody, the JCPOA was never going to work, because at the end of the day, the JCPOA's restrictions were almost all lifted, and Iran got to enrich as much as they wanted to enrich with modern centrifuges, etc. And their breakout window was going to always shrink down to a very short period of time. And so now when you have that reality, and you have now the Iranians themselves saying, yeah, we could change that fatwa. See, the fatwa is not carved in stone. You can't go to sleep at night and say, well, Iran has a fatwa, because Iran will say, nope, Israel's a dangerous country and we have to change things. So now what do? You got to get rid of Iran's nuclear program. There's no debate about this. And I know the Iranians are like, that's our sorry. Guys, you're about to be nuked. There, I said it. You see, when Donald Trump was president last time, he was confronted with this problem. How do you deal with Iran's nuclear program? And the idea was to conventionally take it out. The problem is some of these targets are deeply buried. We don't have conventional weapons that can do this. So we developed, under Donald Trump's instructions, new classes of nuclear weapons. They're low-yield nuclear weapons, but designed to penetrate underground bunkers. A new design of the B-61 gravity bomb and the W-76-2 low-yield warhead delivered by the Trident missile off of a submarine. These weapons will take out Iran's nuclear infrastructure and buried command and control facilities. So when the Iranian government flees to Mashhad and goes down into the bunkers that North Korea built for them in the 1990s, which we've been tracking, if you remember when the Beast of Kandahar, that big drone, B-2 looking drone, got kidnapped by the Iranians over Western Iran and stolen, they landed it. It was taking pictures of Mashhad. We've been monitoring all that. We know where they are. We know everything. And so what's going to happen, Iran, is you've been told you have, 2 weeks, 2 months? I don't know there's a period of time that Trump has put out there to either negotiate or die. And if you choose death, then Donald Trump is going to nuke you. He is going to take out your nuclear facilities, your command and control. It's a regime change operation. It's designed to eliminate you from the face of the earth. The theocracy will no longer exist because none of you will be alive. Your economy will be destroyed. It's going to be a blitz designed to prevent you from doing anything else. So all those facilities that you have out there, your missile facilities, the new naval facility underground, they're all going to be hit with low-yield nuclear weapons. We're going to pop, 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 pop. They're all underground detonations, so there's not going to be big radioactive clouds, and you cease to exist. Do you want that game? Now, you're going to say, well, America has no right. I don't care about that. You're right.
That's not what I was going to say. I was going to say I am highly skeptical. Look, military guys often say we can do all of this stuff, and very rarely is it true, and there will be a response that will destroy the world's economy. That's what I think is what happened.
I think we've been preparing for that response, and we know what Iran has. For instance, if you have ballistic missiles, and your ballistic missiles are stored in an underground facility, and you have to bring them out to deploy them, what happens when I hit that underground facility? Understand, Jamal, this will happen in one night. This isn't something that's going to extend out for days. This is a strike that will happen in one night.
But see, I think Iran has also been planning for this for decades. Meaning,
Not
in Iran's mind,
no one's planned for this. No one's planned for this. You can't plan for this. You can't plan for what's going to happen.
Now, I guess the first question is Trump serious? Meaning, is this legitimately on the table that Trump may go this route?
100%. And you know who believes him? The Iranians. Want to know why? Because you remember how they got the letter and they went, oh, we hate you. You wrote this letter, a nasty letter. And we won't negotiate with you. We will hate you. You do what you need to do. You want to have an economic war, you want to do this, have this, that, and the other thing. And then Trump went, I'm going to nuke you. And they went, we're willing to talk. They're willing to talk now. And they're talking. There are things happening. Trump, the madman, did it again, I believe. See, I don't think there's going to be a nuclear war because I think the Iranians have woken up and went, we don't need this stuff, because they had an internal discussion. I'm just telling you right now, the best they're going to be able to do is fire 1,000 missiles against Israel. But then they disappear because there won't be a reload because the nation disappears. And the supreme leader disappears. The Revolutionary Guard command disappears. Everything disappears. And they're left with nothing. And I think a wise leader says, we're not in the business of this nation that we've been building so assiduously since the revolution, this Islamic revolution that we believe in for the betterment of our people. We're not in the business of throwing that all away for what? Now here, this is where it comes down to their nuclear program. They say it's not a nuclear weapons program. They say it's for peaceful energy. Now, that argument flew when the United States had sanctions. We were blocking the building of the Bushehr reactor. Remember, Russia had to come in and finish the construction, but now the fuel, they needed guarantees of fuel supply, so they have their indigenous thing. But the amount of uranium that they can produce far exceeds the needs of the Bushehr reactor. So Iran said, well, we're going to build other nuclear reactors, and they were talking about it. They can't do it. So Russia came in as part of the strategic framework and said, we'll build those reactors for you. But a key aspect to our construction of those reactors is that we provide the fuel.
Right.
So there's no longer a need for Iran's indigenous uranium enrichment program. There is no legitimate, peaceful need for it. So its continued existence must be and will be seen as a threat by the rest of the world. And the Iranians have to understand this. Now, they have pride, and they're saying this is our national pride and all that stuff. You know, I'm sorry, but the situation is today, you got to give it up.
Wait, to be clear, it's not the rest of the world, it's Israel. It's just
no,
Israel.
No, let's be clear. Russia doesn't want an Iranian nuclear weapon. China doesn't want an Iranian nuclear weapon. France doesn't want it. Europe doesn't want it. It's the whole world that doesn't want it. It's not just Israel. Nobody wants Iran to cross into that nuclear threshold. Israel is, of course, pressuring the United States, but the Russians, you don't see the Russians running up and defending the Iranians on this one. You don't see China going, nope, stop it. Iran's allowed to have. Everybody's saying, nah, Iran, you're wrong on this. You got to get rid of it. And that's why I think the Iranians have woken up and said, all right, we need to begin negotiations to get rid of this nuclear stuff so that this threat disappears. And here's the thing for Donald Trump. The driver of conflict in the Middle East, the biggest driver, is Israel, Iran. If you solve the Iranian issue, you actually help create stability for the rest of the Middle East, so it becomes more approachable in terms of problem solving for peaceful outcomes. But the thing that hangs over, it was the same thing when I was going to Israel and talking about Iraq. Every time I was there talking about, okay, we've done a great thing to get rid of Iraq's WMD and all that stuff, all the Israelis said, but the Iranians, but the Iranians, but the Iranians.
But the Israelis. But the Israelis. Israel has a nuclear weapon. Israel has been on a killing spree for the last year and a half. And you can make an argument for the last 70 years. How on earth can an argument be made that Israel can have a nuclear weapon that goes unacknowledged, but that everybody knows that they have? But, Iran is the issue.
Did Israel sign the nuclear non-proliferation treaty? Did Israel sign the nuclear non-proliferation treaty?
No. By the same token,
there's the argument. There's the argument.
What do you mean that's the argument, Scott? I guess my point is, look, I got to be honest. I don't really know the treaty.
I'm not defending Israel. I'm just saying that Iran signed a treaty.
Okay.
And Iran signed the treaty knowing that Israel had nuclear weapons.
I know, but if Iran takes its name off the treaty, they will be attacked immediately because it would be seen as Iran is trying to make a play for nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not fair. I'm not talking about being fair. I'm talking about reality right now.
It's reality, yeah.
And when you're looking for peace, you've got to deal with reality, not fiction, not fantasy. If you and I agree we want peace in the Middle East, then I think right now the big driver here isn't Gaza. I know our hearts and souls. You know me on Gaza, how I believe, but to be honest, Gaza is a blip on the radar compared to what would happen if there was a nuclear conflict involving the United States taking out Iran. You know, the most you could kill in Gaza, let's say we committed genocide against all the Gazans, you know, what, 2 million?
People, yeah. Well, 2 million in Gaza, right.
If we have a nuclear war with Iran, there's the potential of killing tens of millions.
Oh.
So the scope and scale of this. So this is why I put my major effort right now analytically on how to prevent this conflict and why it's important to prevent this conflict. And I don't allow myself, and again, I don't mean to be demeaning to anybody, but I don't allow myself to get distracted by Gaza. Gaza's a sideshow. I warned about this early on. When Hamas did their action, I said it's imperative that, and I said, this is why Hezbollah isn't escalating big. This is why Iran's not coming in, because the only way to help the Palestinian people is to keep the focus on Gaza and the Palestinian issue. But it's such a minor issue. It's a huge moral issue. But geopolitically, it's such a minor non-issue when you compare, for instance, an Israeli-Hezbollah war. If Israel went into a full-scale war with Hezbollah, which they did, and what happened? The moment Israel started bombing Hezbollah, nobody talked about Gaza anymore.
Right.
We weren't talking about Gaza anymore. And if Israel gets, you know, now you have True Promise and all this stuff, Israel, Iran, nobody's talking about Gaza. This is where we're at right now. If you want to focus on Gaza, you've got to solve these other problems to get back to Gaza. But Israel, this was one of the strategies of Netanyahu, is to expand the conflict so that the scope and scale is greater than Gaza, which means that people aren't focused on that anymore. When you're telling people that there could be a war with Iran that causes the price of oil to shoot up to $200 a barrel, there's not going to be too many people going, yeah, but Gaza.
But would you agree with me, though, that the root is Gaza? I mean, the entire point of True Promise, in some respects, or the axis of resistance in and of itself, has a lot to do with Israel's occupation and expansion. Meaning, it's like, until you solve that part, the other stuff just remains. Even if you get rid of Iran's nuclear program, you've given Israel the dispensation of force, meaning you've effectively allowed Israel to do whatever it wants in the region as a superpower in the region with nukes unopposed. Like, it seems that the issue is Gaza, even if this issue spreads. Yemen, the Houthis are literally attacking ships in the Red Sea because of Gaza. Iran.
Right. But I mean, Gaza is a problem, but that's like saying I have an ingrown toenail, and it hurts. I can't walk because of it. It's bad. It's infected. I got to deal with that, but I've got a brain tumor.
See, no, I don't think that analogy is right. I think it's almost like you have tooth decay, and you find out that the tooth decay is causing heart disease. I'm saying the tooth decay was the issue. I can tell you now, doctors are looking at people's teeth to make sure that those people don't end up with something later on. I think it's that. Meaning, I agree with you, right? The war with Iran and Israel will be dramatic, and it will be over the top. Iran is, 88 million people, some insane number of people. So, agreed. You have my agreement. But part of the reason for that issue existing and inflaming of that issue is Gaza. That Israel has gone on a killing spree over the last year and a half, 2 years, that has gotten Iran into it, Hezbollah into it, Yemen into it, meaning the root of it has to do with that. So you have my agreement.
But Jamal, who cares about Gaza? I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be blunt here. Egypt doesn't care about Gaza. Jordan doesn't care about Gaza. Syria, I mean, doesn't anymore.
They don't exist. Yeah.
Saudi Arabia doesn't care about Gaza. Kuwait doesn't care about United Arab Emirates. So Gaza, to be fair here, is an artificial construct of global morality imposed on a situation. Left to its own devices, though, the region would solve Gaza by making it disappear. Mm-hmm. So it's not just an Israeli problem. Because I mean, when you have the Saudis, the home of Wahhabism, coming out and having a major Saudi blogger put out something where he says the Palestinians are an artificial construct. Who are the Palestinians? They're not even Arabs. They're an amalgam of Circassians and Armenians and this and that who have come together under Ottoman rule. It's a fake entity, and it shouldn't be given the right of statehood. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying when you have the Saudis articulating this publicly, knowing that in Saudi Arabia, if you articulate something publicly that's not supported by MBS, you're shut down. But the fact is, it's being allowed to go, which means that's the official stance of the Saudi government.
It's a point of view. Yeah.
And so, this is what frustrates me, because I've bought into the morality of the argument in favor of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian statehood. It's a moral, it's a just argument. And then I watch their fellow Arabs stab them in the back, betray them at the drop of a hat. Even people who previously called themselves pro-Palestinian, my response is, who are you pro for? Do you consider Hamas to be Palestine? There's half the debate right there. Because a lot of people say they're pro-Palestinian, say, I'm not pro-Hamas. Well, who the hell's fighting for Palestine if not Hamas? It's not Abu Mazen. It's not the Palestinian Authority. If you're pro-Palestinian Authority, you're pro-Israel, because the Palestinian Authority is subordinated to Israel. So what the hell is Palestine? I'm not going to wear a T-shirt with a slice of watermelon on it until the Palestinians themselves decide who the hell they are, because I'm tired of speaking to a schizophrenic audience. When I say I support Palestine, I find out that 8 out of the 10 Palestinians don't support what I'm saying, because they have a different vision of what it is. So that's half the problem, is we're supporting a ghost. We're supporting something that doesn't exist. And frankly speaking, if we stop supporting it, it would die, because it doesn't have a legitimacy within the region that it aspires to be part of. If you can't get the Egyptians to articulate in favor of an independent Palestine and put their money where it's ironic. Yemen has stood up. They're doing the right thing. God bless Ansarallah. But, when we say Yemen, it's not all of Yemen, because there's a big chunk of Yemen that's on the side of the Saudis, United Arab Emirates, that are saying, hell no, we don't care about Palestine. None of the non-Shia, because even you go to Lebanon, the only Arabs in Lebanon who care about Palestine, frankly speaking, are the Shia of Hezbollah, because they are linked to the axis of resistance. So there's an Iranian heart here that's driving this all. Again, which tells the Israelis the best way to shut down, because from the Israeli perspective, they're like, it's like what would happen if we went to the hospital and you saw, I got hit by a car and I'm in the hospital, I'm on, breathing in tubes and all that, but my brainwave is dead. You pull the plug, man. He's done. From the Israeli perspective, there's no brain activity here. This thing called Palestine, there's no brain activity. Why do you keep it on life support? The life support is Iran. Pull the plug on Iran, this thing dies, because nobody wants to save it. There's no organ donors out there saying, give them my heart, give them my lungs, give them my liver, whatever it takes to keep Palestine alive, take it from me. No, we have a bunch of liberal well-wishers here in the United States who are correctly saying this is a moral affront. This is but nobody else wants to keep it alive. I'm tired of going to Arab communities in America and having them unable to tell me what the hell Palestine is. What do they want? And even those communities that are supportive of Palestine, they're basically in support of it because it irritates Israel so much. They use Palestine as a tool against Israel. Their real motivation is to bring Israel down, not to bring Palestine up. This is such a complicated situation right now. I'm fed up with it because, like I said, I poured my heart and soul into saying I believe in the Palestine. But what Palestine do I believe in? Because if my vision for Palestine, which I thought was a unified state, doesn't comport with 8 out of the 10 of the people who claim to be Palestinians, then who the hell am I to intervene? And at the end of the day, if the Palestinians can't agree, maybe it's time to pull the plug. Maybe Palestine doesn't deserve to exist. Because if the only way you keep Palestine alive is by having outsiders go to war, then Palestine is the problem. We've identified the problem. Palestine is the problem. The concept of creating a Palestinian state is the problem. I need the Arabs to start rallying around a Palestinian state. As I went to Iraq in 2002, and I remember I was supposed to speak to the Iraqi parliament, and they're very concerned about what I would say about Israel and all this stuff. And so I had to have a series of negotiations with people because I told them they don't get a right to preview my presentation. I said that's not how this works. But I said, you can't be more Palestinian than the Palestinians. you can't sit here and claim to be a supporter of Palestine and yet forbid things that the Palestinians have agreed to. And if Palestine has agreed to negotiate with Israel, then Iraq can't get in the way of that. Iraq has to say that they will accept what Palestine does. And so that was the way I got around it, where I didn't mention Israel exactly. What I did say in my speech is you can't be more Palestinian than the Palestinians.
Right.
And I think that's what we all need to do right now. We can't be more Palestinian than the Palestinians. If the Palestinians can't figure out who the hell the Palestinians are, then who are we to be out there advocating for them? Because who are we advocating for? I mean, in the United States now, if you say I support Hamas, because to be honest, the only way you can advocate for a Palestinian state today is to advocate for the organization that is fighting for a Palestinian state. It ain't Fatah. It ain't the Palestinian Authority. It's not it's Hamas. So if you're saying I support a Palestinian state, you are indirectly saying I support Hamas. And now you're saying I support a terrorist organization. And with the new Trump administration, you're putting your ass on the line. If you're a foreigner, they're deporting you for saying this. If you're an American, the FBI may come kick down your house. Hello, guys. But my point is, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to take that risk, my God, the people I'm risking for have to be worthy of the risk. Now, I'm willing to do it for Hind Rajab, that 6-year-old girl that was murdered by the Israelis. I'm willing to do it for the people of Gaza because they fought, they stood up, they're willing to sacrifice. But I'm not willing to do a damn thing anymore for the people of the rest of the Palestinians. And I'm certainly not going to do it for the Palestinian diaspora that cheered the fall of Bashar al-Assad and is silent as Alawites and Christians are slaughtered.
Oh,
I am not going to support that.
Well, because a lot of people, look, I got to be honest, I had to be educated on that. Like Al Jazeera, certain organizations, perfectly fine with Assad going, perfectly fine with it, and with all of the chaos that came after it, but are bleeding hearts for Palestine.
Yeah,
it confused the hell out of me at first until I had various people to explain, dude, these are different factions. They're not the same.
A human life is a human life.
That's the way I look at it too.
And if I'm going to get all teary-eyed about Hind Rajab, then I should get teary-eyed about the Alawite child that was murdered by Al-Qaeda. And evil is evil. Evil is evil. And Al-Qaeda will always be evil, no matter how much you dress it up, cut the beard, put the tie on. They're head choppers to the core. It's ISIS, it's Al-Qaeda. They've taken control of Syria, and they're murdering people in the name of Islam, a perverted version of Islam. And there are people in the United States that are okay with that, who call themselves, righteous Islamic people. And I reject that. I reject murder in the name of religion. I reject it when Christians do it, and I reject it when Muslims do it. And right now you have people out there cutting heads, slitting throats, killing people, making people crawl on their hands and knees and bark like a dog before you shoot them because they have a different vision of religion than you do. I'm sorry, and I'll say this right now. If Islam is so intolerant of people who don't believe then the problem isn't the people that don't believe. The problem is Islam.
Yeah.
Islam is a religion in the world, a world that has to get along peacefully. The Christians had to learn this. We don't get to go around and rule by the sword anymore. We've decided that the day of the missionary with the sword, convert or die, is over. That's incompatible with Christian faith. And there are many Muslims out there who don't believe in what's happening here. But if you're calling yourself a Muslim and you live in the United States and you are okay with Muslims killing Alawites because the Alawites aren't really Muslim, then that's a brand of Islam I don't want to be associated with, and I don't want it in my country. So when Tulsi Gabbard says, Islamic extremism is the biggest threat, the first thing is like, oh, come on, Tulsi, this again? But then I'm like, well, wait a minute. Islamic extremism, not Islam. Islamic extremism. And Islamic extremism, if it's defined by people who believe that if you don't comport with their vision of Islam, that they can refer to an obscure part of the Quran that says, I get to kill you, the problem isn't me. The problem is them. And this comes down to the same thing with Palestine. There has to be a unified vision of, or at least a majority vision of what Palestine is before we talk about supporting the creation of Palestine. And there also has to be, unity in why we're doing this. What I'm finding out is most people are doing this not because they support Palestine, but because this is an effective tool to oppose Israel.
But Israel thinks of that too. I mean,
I'm not defending Israel at all. Don't get me wrong.
no. I'm not saying you're defending it. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to point out that, look, I agree with you. There's not a unified vision. You have Fatah, you have Hamas. I would argue that part of that is policy to keep that division in play in general, right? I mean, that was the whole reason that Israel was backing Hamas at one point, because, hey, we get to split these two sects. We get to create a division.
I think and unfortunately I've got to go, but I'll just leave you this. Yeah. What you said is very important. And I think it's time we all look in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we being played? Because there are people take advantage of your good soul. I'd like to believe I have a good soul, our kind spirit, and our desire to want to do the right thing. And there's people that take advantage of that. And then instead of us doing what we firmly believe in, we're being indirectly controlled to be tools. What's the term they always use? A useful idiot. I believe in this and I believe in that, but you're really being, they're controlling you. And this whole concept of the Arab-Israeli conflict and all this stuff, sometimes I sit back and I say, are we just being played? Are we being played for a grander, strategy that uses conflict to achieve something else? All I know is I've lost faith in the Palestinian cause. It doesn't mean that I don't believe in the righteousness of a Palestinian state. I just don't trust the Palestinians anymore, as collectively. I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to believe. I don't know what they stand for. I don't know what they want. They don't know what they want. They can't agree amongst each other what they want. And so, that also makes it easier for me to say, let's try and solve Iran. Because I dealt with the Iranians.
That's more of a clarified issue for you. Yeah. That's more clear for you. That's more clarified.
For my poor little Marine Corps brain, which thrives on simplicity, I can deal with the Iranians. That doesn't mean that they're complicated. They don't have factions. They have problems. Everybody has problems. Look at America. We are so screwed up. It's not even funny. But the Iranians, I think I understand them. I understand their objectives, especially the believers in the Islamic Republic. It's very clear to me what they want, and I'm able to wrap that up and navigate that policy path. With Palestine, I thought I could. I thought I had it. I don't. It is a fractured. It is just broken, and I don't know if Humpty Dumpty can be put back together again. I don't know. I'm not going to be the guy to do it. I'm not going to be the person wasting the time to put the pieces together. If Palestinians can do it themselves and come together with something that makes sense, I'll jump on board. But I'm not going to sit here and be beating my head against the wall supporting a vision that's linked to Hamas when the rest of the Palestinians are going to abandon them in a heartbeat and abandon me in the process, and say, no, this is what we're doing. This is what we believe in. And the only ones fighting for a Palestinian state today is Hamas. No one else is fighting for it. No one.
Scott Ritter, former UN's weapons inspector, weapons of mass destruction, whistleblower. Scott, I deeply appreciate this conversation. I really do.
Okay, thanks.
You have a good one, man. Be safe.
You too.
All right. We are going to end this. I appreciate all of you for joining me. I know many of you disagreed with what Scott said. I disagree with what Scott said too. I think, look, I will tell you from my take before I close. It is, of all the issues that we cover, this is the most maddening to me. I feel like we're banging our head on the wall and nothing gets accomplished. And it's like 70 years later and nothing gets accomplished. And Israel goes on these killing sprees every so often, mowing the lawn, as they call it. Nothing gets accomplished. October 7th happens. Shock, awe. Israel has their security fundamentally challenged by a group that they thought they had in a prison, open-air ghetto, killing en masse for a year and a half. The world watches. Nothing happens. It is maddening issue. If you're looking at Ukraine and Russia, okay, there's movement, there's negotiations, there's something that's happening. You know that Russia is ultimately going to win in that context. Okay, so something is moving in that issue. Even with Iran stuff, with Donald Trump threatening to hit Iran, there's negotiations in the air of that threat that's lingering. Okay, again, that's an issue. Something's moving. 70 years later. And this idea of the state, the US, Israel does everything in their power to prevent it from coming to about, despite the fact that they're giving it lip service. It is a maddening issue. And then, as Scott pointed out, which I think grates, and it grates on me too, actually, this idea that Hamas, who is ostensibly a Muslim organization, is okay with Assad being taken down, celebrates Assad being taken down. And for people like me, what that means is that minority communities are going to be slaughtered. And lo and behold, we have minority communities being slaughtered with Alawites, Shias, Christians, non-believers of whatever the hell ISIS believes in, dragged out of their house and killed. I watched an 8-year-old get beat by grown men because she was of a different religious type. And so you get journals like Al Jazeera thinking this is okay and calling this some kind of uprising, despite the fact you have Uyghurs, you have people, Uzbeks, people who are not Syrians coming into Syria, taking power in Syria. Jelani is ISIS through and through. He's a head chopper, a literal head chopper. I can show you videos where he's out there chopping heads. And so it's disconcerting. It's weird. Initially, I didn't understand it until it was like, hey, different sex. Just like in America, you have different political factions. Despite the fact that you would think that all of these people would be on the similar side. Not so much. But I disagree with him. I think, because look, at the end of the day, and I'll end this because I have to go. You have 2 million people who are there. That's reality. You got to deal with that. You have what, 2, 3, 4 million people in West Bank. They're there. You have to deal with that. It's not an issue where you can say, well, I'm done with the issue, because they are there. They're not going anywhere. You have to deal with the fact that they're there. And so this idea of, okay, well, I'm just going to blow this off. I don't want to deal with this issue anymore. I'm sick of this issue. They don't know what they stand for, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, dude, you've had an open air ghetto that has been there for decades. You've had an apartheid state, literally an apartheid state that has only gotten worse, that has been there for decades. You have to deal with that. That's meaning you can cognitively say, I'm taking this off the table as an issue. I'm throwing it away. They're human beings that are living in horrendous conditions that have only gotten magnificently worse. They're there. You, as an individual, can take it off as an issue, but it's there. It's not going anywhere. All right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe.